2028 Delaware High School mock trial is now in session. Your Honorable Alan Davis presiding, Chief Magistrate. Please be seated.
Good afternoon. I want to remind everyone in the courtroom that we've got a packed courtroom, that there is no communication between the competitors and anyone else in the courtroom until after the round has ended. For the competitors, we will take breaks where they are normally done. However, we will do them in place. We will not recess just to keep things moving. Timekeepers, can you identify yourselves, please?
My name is Alyssa Whaley.
Ethan Simon, Divine Zimmers, Peter Chad.
Please remember that the only communication allowed between the timekeepers and the rest of the team is the display of your time cards. Team captains have rosters been exchanged and provided to the judging panel.
Rosters have been exchanged between teams, Your Honor, but not provided to the judging panel or yourself.
Would you like to take care of that at this moment?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are the teams ready to begin?
We are, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Teams ready to begin. I will swear to the witnesses. Would witnesses please stand? Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts of this case and to the rules of the mock trial competition? If so, please answer, I do.
I do.
Are there any pretrial, you may have a seat. Are there any pretrial matters before we begin?
Yes, Your Honor. Would you like us to do pre-trial before introduction?
Actually, you can introduce yourself then, that's fine.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Claudia Offit, and today I will be delivering the closing argument for the prosecution, as well as conducting the direct examination of Macy Henry and the cross-examination of Ripley Kerr.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Cameron Cressy, and I will be delivering the opening statement for the prosecution, as well as conducting the direct examination of Sean McGee and the cross-examination of Dakota Bourne.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Wes McGee, and today I will be conducting the direct of I will be conducting the direct of Detective Sam Nye and the cross-examination of the defendant.
And Your Honor, at this time, permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves.
Please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is John Kepley, and I am Detective Sam Nye.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Madison Boggs, and I am Macy Henry.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Tristan Hudson, and I am Sean McGee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Taylor Dayton. Today I will be conducting the direct examination of Ripley Kerr, the cross-examination of Sean McGee, as well as delivering the opening statement.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Madeline Betts. I'm an attorney for the defense. Today I will be conducting the direct examination of Sidney Belmont, the cross-examination of Sam Nye, as well as delivering the closing argument.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Jacob Safford. I'm an attorney for the defense. Today I will be conducting the direct examination of the defendant, Dakota Bourne, as well as the cross-examination of Macy Henry.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Taylor Icona. I am Ripley Kerr.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Tanner Dade, and I am Sydney Bell.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Members of the jury, opposing counsel, my name is Daphne Branner, and I am Dakota Warren.
Thank you, Nancy. Are there any other pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution asks permission to move freely about courtroom,
Permission to go.
and we would like to bring to the court's attention that in accordance with Delaware law, expert witnesses in today's case will be qualified but not formally proffered.
Understood. Thank you.
We would also like to bring to the court's attention that the stipulations of today's case have been formally agreed to by both sides and entered into evidence.
Thank you.
Specifically, Your Honor, we would like to point out Stipulation 8, which states that Billie Joe Murray's death resulted directly from her hack ring breaking during her ride.
Noted.
And finally, Your Honor, we would ask permission for co-counsel to publish exhibits to the jury as they are entered into evidence, and for those exhibits to retain their original identification.
Without objection. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, without objection, that's fine.
Thank you. The prosecution has no further pretrial matters, Your Honor.
Any pretrial matters from the defense?
Yes, the defense asks that under the stipulations, we immediately admit exhibits 15, 16, and 12 under stipulation 7 and 6 accordingly.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor, but with that, we would like to admit Exhibit 3.
That would be fine. We'll admit all exhibits that have been stipulated to it.
We also ask for the same privileges granted to the prosecution.
Same privileges granted.
Thank you.
Once we have the exhibits, we'll commence.
Your Honor, we ask that the defendant be allowed to sit at counsel table.
The defendant is permitted to sit at the counsel table.
Thank you.
The court has exhibits 12, 15, and 16. I think so. Counsel ready for opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. Imagine, it is the last 2 days of the annual Delaware State Fair, and all eyes are on the saddle bronc competition, as two competitors have equal chance to walk away with the gold buckle and the rodeo scholarship. Billie Joe Murray is the crowd favorite, and Dakota Bourne, the underdog. But Dakota Bourne is desperate. Her future largely depends on her success in this Harrington Rodeo final. And she knows that this is a desperate time, therefore, it calls for desperate measures. In the words of the defendant herself, all she needed was a little edge. So, what edge does she give herself? A guarantee that Billie Joe Murray will be disqualified from the Harrington Finals and unable to compete in any future rodeos. Dakota Bourne is desperate. She's desperate to win and wants to ensure her success. She knows the only thing keeping Billie Joe Murray on her horse is her hack ring. So Dakota Bourne cuts Billie Joe Murray's hack ring and puts Billie Joe Murray's life at risk. Dakota Bourne's desperation gets her exactly what she wants. Now, we, the prosecution, hold the only burden in this case today. We must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dakota Bourne is guilty of murder in the second degree. You must find that our explanation is the only reasonable explanation. Therefore, to prove this burden, we, the prosecution, will show you the following. First, that Billie Joe Murray's death was recklessly caused by the defendant. And second, that the defendant's actions manifest a cruel, wicked, and depraved indifference to human life, meaning that Dakota Bourne was aware of her actions. Her actions were done willfully, with blatant disregard for risk of death and knowing disregard for the safety of others. Now, in order to help prove this burden, we, the prosecution, will bring forth 3 witnesses. First, Macy Henry, the best friend of Billie Joe Murray and fellow competitor of Dakota Bourne, who will elaborate on the rivalry between Billie Joe Murray and Dakota Bourne, as well as tell you her account of Dakota-born tampering with Billie Joe Murray's gear bag the day of the Harrington Finals. Next, Sean McGee, a pickup rider who was assigned to Billie Joe Murray the day of the Harrington Finals. Sean will also elaborate on the desperation of Dakota-born, as well as tell you that it's unusual for Billie Joe Murray to fall off her horse, and his account of Dakota-born tampering with Billie Joe Murray's gear bag the night before the Harrington Finals. And finally, Detective Sam Nye, who can tell you with certainty that the hack ring was cut, and who can conclude that the fibers found on the defendant's pocket knife are identical to the fibers found in Billie Joe Murray's hack ring. Now, the defense will also bring forth 3 witnesses. Ripley Kerr, the vice president of the NCRA, whose own security measures will reveal that Dakota-born would have had access to Billie Joe Murray's gear bag the night before and the day of the Harrington Finals, and who will tell you that the only way for Dakota-born to win the Harrington Finals was for Billie Joe Murray to be disqualified. Sydney Bell, a forensics expert who has no specific details in the examination processes that she used, that will tell you that the hack ring was in otherwise good condition and that it could have been cut. And finally, Dakota-born, the defendant herself, who needed the rodeo scholarship to go to college, who had access to Billie Joe Murray's gear bag, and who will tell you in her own words, all she needed was a little edge. We, the prosecution, will show you that Dakota-born cut Billie Joe Murray's hack ring, is knowledgeable of bronc riding, and with this knowledge knows exactly what to do to give herself an edge. We, the prosecution, ask you to look at all the witnesses today and make the only reasonable choice. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and Dakota-born is desperate. At the end of the trial today, we, the prosecution, will ask you to return the verdict of guilty for murder in the 2nd degree. Thank you.
Ms. Chris. Mr. B.
The easy thing. The right thing. Often, these are not the same, but in deciding today's case, you'll find that they are. Your Honor, members of the jury, may it please the court, today I, Taylor Dade, along with my co-counsel, Madeline Betts and Jacob Safford, will direct testimony sharing with you the story of a young girl following her dreams, Dakota-born. She did not take an easy route. She struggled and trained, yet remained honest and driven, and earned her successes. She sought to make her father proud and add to his successful legacy. Today you'll hear that Dakota-born Billie Joe Murray, one of her longtime competitors, and the other riders in this case participated in a rodeo event called saddle bronc riding. In this event, the rider attempts to ride a bucking horse with nothing to hold on to but a single rope called a hack rein. As you can imagine, this is a very important piece of equipment to ensure that the rider completes the ride. It was the hack rein that broke during the ride of Billie Joe Murray on August 6th, causing her to fall off her horse and eventually die. This was a truly tragic accident that is now being called 2nd-degree murder. The state has the burden of proof in this case. They must prove the 3 elements of 2nd-degree murder. The first, that Billie Joe Murray died, which is a sad, uncontestable fact. The second, that this death resulted from the reckless action of another person. And the third, that this action manifested a cruel, wicked, and depraved indifference to human life. Today, the state will present the case directing the blame against Dakota-born, alleging that she intentionally cut Billie Joe's hack ring to sabotage her ride. We must prove this to you beyond a reasonable doubt, which means that a reasonable person, like you all, members of the jury, will be able to convict Dakota without difficulty, without feeling a twinge of doubt in your stomach. However, the state will not be able to meet their burden today. They'll call 3 witnesses, including Sam Nye, the lead detective in this case, who you'll hear pursued an investigation of Dakota based on an initial suspicion. He went looking for what he wanted to see, what was easier for him to see. You'll hear that because of his prejudice, he failed to fully investigate his other prime suspects, Macy Henry. Macy will also take the stand. She'll freely share with you how she was one of Billie Joe's close friends, but you'll also learn that she had the motive, opportunity, and an unverified alibi the night before the rodeo, when the state alleges the rope was most likely to have been cut. Let's hear from Sean McGee, a rodeo hand whose pseudo-eyewitness testimony will still find there's much to doubt. The defense will also call witnesses today. First is Ripley Kerr, the head of the rodeo, who will share with you how she knows Dakota to be an honest competitor, that although riders regularly fall off their horses, rodeo deaths and even serious injuries are extremely rare. Next, you'll hear from Sydney Belmont, a forensics expert and rodeo innovator who will tell you it is impossible to say how the rope was cut, or if it was even cut at all. Finally, we'll hear from Dakota Bourne, the defendant, who is freely and voluntarily waiving her Fifth Amendment right to share with you the truth about what happened at the rodeo. It is easier to think that a young talent like Billie Joe Murray has passed because of foul play rather than a tragic accident that it is. It is easier to pursue an investigation of Billie Joe's competitor, Dakota, rather than her friend, Macy Henry. But you will also easily see the abundance of doubt in the state's case today. So, listen closely to all of the evidence presented today. What rings true, and what awakens that twinge of doubt in the pit of your stomach, that twinge of doubt that you cannot ignore? The state cannot meet their burden today. Your Honor, members of the jury, at the conclusion of today's case, you'll be asked to decide what you believe, who you believe. You'll be moved to make the right choice, and the easy choice. You'll be moved to find Dakota Bourne not guilty of murder in the second degree. Thank you.
Prosecution call her first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the prosecution calls Macy Henry to the stand. Could you please state your name for the record of the court?
My name is Macy Henry.
What do you like to do, Miss Henry?
Well, I like to sing, I like to cook, but above all, I love bronc riding. It's where I met my best friend, Billie Joe.
How did you get involved in bronc riding?
My dad was a bronc rider, and I used to sit in the bleachers and watch him during competition. So when I mentioned an interest to my mom, she immediately signed me up for the junior rodeo circuit.
What was your experience in the junior rodeo circuit like?
It was amazing. You know how some people say they have love at first sight? Well, that was me when I got on my first horse.
Now, a couple minutes ago you mentioned your best friend, Billie Joe. Can you tell me about your relationship with her?
Billie Joe's relationship and I went far beyond bronc riding. We became immediate best friends, almost like sisters. We ended up in the same elementary school, same middle school, where we did some pretty awesome duets in the school talent show, and then we ended up in the same high school, which made traveling to competitions a lot easier.
What competitions are those?
Our bronc riding competitions.
Now, can you explain to the jury how exactly bronc riding works?
Basically, you are trying to stay on the horse while the horse attempts to buck you off. You have to stay on for at least 8 seconds or you're disqualified.
And how would a rider prepare for competition?
Lots and lots of practice and taking really good care of your equipment.
Now, why is it so important to take good care of your equipment?
Essentially, your equipment is what's keeping you on the horse.
So, whose equipment are you responsible for?
Of course, I was responsible for my own, but after a while, I started taking care of Billie Joe's as well.
Now, Ms. Henry, why were you responsible for taking care of Billie Joe's equipment?
Billie Joe became very, very successful, and she really didn't have time to take care of her equipment, so I started taking care of it for her.
How did you feel about that?
Well, it was really tiring. Taking care of 2 separate tasks takes up a lot of time and effort, but she was doing so well, and I was so happy for her.
So, moving back to bronc riding, can you explain to the jury how scoring in this event works?
So there are 2 judges looking at both the horse and the rider. Each judge is provided 25 points for the rider and 25 points for the horse. Now, again, there are 2 judges. So you've got 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25, which in total can add up to 100.
And who are the top competitors in your division?
In my division, I am in 3rd. I scored between the 60s and 70s. In 2nd place was Dakota or Cody Warren, who usually scored 8 and above. And in 1st place was Billie Joe. She also scored 8 and above.
Now, you just mentioned one Dakota Boren. Can you tell the jury who that is?
Cody Boren is a fellow rider and competitor of mine.
And do you see this person in the courtroom today?
Yes, I did.
Could you identify them, please?
She is wearing the black jacket, the glasses, and the blue shirt.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my witness has correctly identified the defendant, Dakota Boren.
So noted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, when was the last time you competed with the defendant?
That would be at the Harrington Finals.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the days leading up to the Harrington Finals. What was going on in that time?
The rivalry between Billy Joe and Cody started to get out of hand. Even a month before the finals, I had to break up the confrontation between them.
Did you ever talk to the defendant about this?
I did, and the only thing she mentioned is that if Billy Joe didn't compete, she was certain to win.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about the night immediately before the Harrington Finals. What was happening that evening?
There was a hoedown being held. They're usually held the night before competition as a good way to calm down and relieve some stress before the next day's competition.
And did anything out of the ordinary happen at this hoedown?
Cody left relatively early that night.
How do you know that that's out of the ordinary?
Billy Joe and I always had so much fun at those hoedowns that we stayed until the end. And normally Cody did too. So seeing her leave early seemed a little unusual.
Now, did you see the defendant again before competition the next day?
I did. I saw her the morning of. She was messing with Billy Joe's bag. Cody actually had her hand inside of Billy Joe's bag.
What did you do when you saw that?
I immediately grabbed the bag and I told her to move along.
What happened after this?
I put the bag down and I went about my business. I had other things to take care of before my ride.
Now, Miss Henry, did you see Billy Joe's ride that day?
Unfortunately, I did.
Could you tell the jury what happened?
It looked like it was going to be another perfect ride. She came out and she looked so perfect, but within the blink of an eye, she was flying off her horse.
What did you do when you saw her flying off her horse?
In that moment, I was in utter shock. But when she landed, I immediately jumped the fence and I ran to her side to see if she was okay.
Do you know if she was okay, Miss Henry?
From the looks of it, she was not. She was laying there and she wasn't moving. She was just muttering Cody's name under her breath.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, and I ask that the thing the witness just said be stricken from the record.
Your Honor, if I may respond?
Yes.
This statement falls under hearsay exception 8032, excited utterance. It is a statement made immediately after a startling event and therefore is an exception to hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
8032 describes an unusual or startling event in the eyes of the beholder, and I would argue that someone who has been previously testified as a bronc rider for many years would not find this an unusual event. As many witnesses will testify, this is actually rather regular in the bronc riding industry. You could compare it and it would be synonymous to a football player being tackled or someone falling off their bike if they were biking.
Your Honor, if I may?
I'm going to overrule the objection at the moment, and you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Miss Henry, could you repeat whose name it was that Billy Joe was muttering?
She was muttering Cody's.
What happened after that?
The paramedics came and they took her away on a stretcher. You know, I thought it was just going to be a couple broken bones and most likely a concussion, but that's not what it was.
What was it, Miss Henry?
Billy Joe passed away in the hospital.
Do you know how the other riders in the rodeo reacted to this news?
Everyone seemed pretty shocked about it. I had a fellow cowboy come up to me and let me know that, Cody just made a remark saying that she guessed that lucky saddle wasn't so lucky after all.
And Miss
Objection, Your
Henry?
Honor. This would be hearsay as well. She cannot testify to the statement of another person.
Your Honor, if I may? The statement of the party opponent falls under Rule 801D2, admission by a party opponent, and therefore is not hearsay.
Your Honor, it's hearsay within hearsay.
Your Honor, if I may, the opposing counsel is referring to...
One second.
My apologies.
When you say hearsay within hearsay, what are you saying?
I'm saying that she is testifying to this, to the statement of our defendant. However, it is the defendant's testimony of another person.
Your Honor, I'm not sure I understand what counsel said. If
Could you clarify?
I'm saying that the statement she just referred to is the recollection of our defendant, yes. However, it is the recollection of something someone else said who is not testifying to that statement.
Your Honor, if opposing counsel is referring to the outside statement, that falls under hearsay section 803.21, reputation concerning character. This goes to the defendant's interactions within their community and the community's perception of their character as a result of that.
Okay. Again, I'm going to overrule the objection for the moment.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Henry, could you repeat what it was that the defendant said upon hearing that Billy Joe had passed away?
She guessed that that lucky saddle wasn't so lucky after all.
Ms. Henry, how did you react when you learned that your best friend had died?
Pretty much like this, just 100 times worse. I went cold, I was completely numb, and I collapsed to the floor and I started crying. And in that moment I realized that the last memory I have of my best friend, she wasn't moving.
I'm sorry, Ms. Henry. No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecutor.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Henry. My name is Henry. My name is Jacob Saffner. I'll be asking you a couple of questions. I'm going to start with, you would describe the relationship between the late Billy Joe Murray and our defendant, Dakota Bourne, a rivalry, would you not?
I would. They really didn't get along.
And as you testified during your direct, you had full knowledge of some of the fights that have taken place between them.
I did know of one where I actually had to break them up, yes.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
And in the event of a tragedy such as today, in your own eyes, you would place her as a suspect, would you not?
Yes, I would. I mean, they were rivals.
You typically score, or Billy Joe and Dakota Bourne typically scored highly in the competition. You said high 80s for reference, correct?
Yes.
And you typically scored slightly below this, typically third, correct?
Yes, I usually scored between the 60s and the 70s.
And in the grand scheme of the competition, you were placed overall as third, yes?
Yes.
With first place deceased being Billy Joe Murray, and second place unable to receive the scholarship due to her attendance in court today, that places you third as next in line to receive said scholarship, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. 701 speculation. Counsel is asking the witness to speculate to the workings of the NCRA and the succession of the scholarship. And as she is not an employee of the NCRA, she cannot testify to that.
Your Honor, I would respond that I just laid the foundation for that entire judgment. She does not have to be a member or know the scoring standards of the NCRA to testify that if first and second place are not receiving a scholarship, then third place would.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, good.
Opposing counsel testified twice in that question, saying that first place was out and second place was excluded and disqualified from the competition. And he's asking the witness to draw a conclusion based on testimony that he has provided, not her. And therefore, this would be speculation.
Okay. I'm going to sustain the objection to the extent that if you lay additional foundation for this question, you can continue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Billy Joe Murray is deceased, correct?
Unfortunately, yes, she is.
And our defendant not being able to receive the scholarship due to her attendance in court, she wouldn't be able to receive the scholarship, correct?
I would guess not.
And typically, if first and second place aren't able to receive something, third place receives it, correct?
I would assume so, but I don't actually know what's going on with first place and scholarship.
So that's a yes.
I would guess so.
So, assuming that first and second place wouldn't be able to compete in said competition or receive the scholarship, you in third place would be able to receive the scholarship, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. 701 speculation. Counsel has asked the questions and the witness has testified to not knowing what is going on with the scholarship or the standings. Therefore, it would be speculation for her to answer this question.
Your Honor, I would say that it almost is certain that if first and second place are not receiving something, then the third place would be the ultimate contender for this. Although she cannot testify to the absolute validity of that, I have asked in her own knowledge would she be next in line for said scholarship, not that she would receive it.
Your Honor, if I may. As counsel just stated, she cannot testify to the validity of that, and therefore this is a question that calls for speculation.
Your Honor, if I may.
I'm going to sustain the objection to the extent that you're stuck with the answer that your witness has given.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You are almost fully responsible for Billy Joe's being correct?
Almost fully, yes.
And this includes the tedious maintenance and upkeep required for rodeo gear, correct?
Yes, I did it with hers as well as my own.
And you describe your relationship with her as a sisterhood.
I did, yes.
However, in your own words, you describe her as arrogant, egotistical, even elaborate to describe her as treating you differently.
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 403, more prejudicial than probative, opposing counsel is merely trying to taint the jury's opinion of the victim in today's case, and this question holds zero probative value.
I would say this holds immense probative value as the liking or disliking towards the person, the victim in question today, is extremely pertinent to this case.
Your Honor, if I may. Qualifying the victim as arrogant and conceited only goes to taint the jury's opinion of that victim. It has no probative value, especially considering this witness is not the defendant.
I'm going to overrule the objection and allow this question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
So you describe your relationship as a sisterhood, and yet in your own words you describe her as arrogant, egotistical, even elaborate to describe her as treating you differently, correct?
So Billy Joe became very successful, and I do think that she let some of that success go to her head, but at the end of the day, she was still my best friend.
So is that a yes?
At one point I did say that, but again, it was just a success. She was still my best friend no matter what.
And you continue to elaborate and blame her for your lack of success in last year's rodeo, correct?
I do think that taking care of, some of her tack and doing a lot of the driving had some effect, but
In fact, you say, quote, "That's why I think I didn't do as well this last year," end quote, correct?
yes, like I said, I did take on some of the responsibilities.
Moving on, your stall was almost directly adjacent to Billy Joe Murray's, correct?
Yes,
And you had full, unsupervised access to her gear, correct?
yes, I was responsible for her gear. She and I had an agreement.
In fact, on the day of her death, to your knowledge, you were the last to touch her gear, correct?
Technically, Billy Joe was the last to touch her gear. It was hers.
However, you don't know if she did.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
To your knowledge, you were the last to saddle the horse, correct?
Billy Joe and I did it that day.
However, in your own statement, you described yourself as saddling Billy Joe's horse as she was too busy signing autographs.
I did help her that day, yes.
So you had, to your knowledge, you were the last to touch her gear.
Again, Billy Joe was the last to touch her gear. She was on it.
However, saddling the horse, you were the last. Other than her.
Yes.
No further questions.
A brief redirect, Your Honor. Ms. Henry, is it at all unusual for you to be in contact with Billy Joe's gear?
No, I was responsible for it. She and I had an agreement.
And is it at all unusual for Billy Joe to be in contact with her own gear?
Well, no, it was her gear.
Now, was it unusual that you saw the defendant in contact with Billy Joe's gear?
Absolutely. Unless there's an agreement like Billy Joe and I, no other rider should be tampering with another rider's gear.
And is it unusual for a rider's hack ring to break?
To my knowledge, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
No recalls this time.
Second.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution will show me the stand.
Just keep in mind you've been sworn.
Of course. Good afternoon.
Please state your name for the record of the court.
Well, my Christian name is Sean Jimmy McGee Jr., but everybody calls me Happy.
And why is that, Mr. McGee?
Well, I've been involved with the rodeo since I was just a little tyke, and every time I was in the rodeo, I always had a humongous smile on my face, so the name came naturally at this time.
And how long have you been involved in the rodeo?
This coming August should be just about 20 years.
What is it that you do in the rodeo?
Well, when I started out, when I was younger, I was a saddle bronc rider myself, but after a knee injury, I became I did a brief stint as a rodeo clown, and now I hold the prestigious title of a pickup rider.
And what's a pickup rider?
Well, so when a rider's doing their ride in the arena and they've completed their 8 seconds, I'll mosey on them next to them, and they'll jump onto my horse, and I'll transport them out of the arena.
We talked a little bit about saddle bronc riding. What is that?
Well, it's a competition in which a rider will be on a horse, and they've got to stay on the horse for 8 seconds. If they fall off, they're disqualified, whereas if they stay on, they get a score.
How is it that riders stay on the horse?
Well, there's a piece of equipment that we like to use in the rodeo community. We call it the hack rein.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to approach the witness with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14. Letter of the clock bench and opposing counsel. Mr. McGee, what is this a picture of?
It's a picture of a hack rein.
And is it a true and accurate representation?
It is. It is.
Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution has had Exhibit 14 brought into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, admitted.
Explain to the jury how a hack rein connects to a horse?
Well, of course I can. So, if you look in the background here, you'll see this little spiderweb of leather, I like to call it. That's called the bridle, and that'll connect directly to the horse. Then you see this leather loop right here, that's the halter, and then this braided rope right here, that is the hack rein itself. And you'll see how the hack rein is fed through another loop, which is part of the hack rein. This right here, that is called the Honda.
And what part of the hack rein bears the rider's weight?
That would be the Honda.
How is that riders reinforce this part of the hack rein?
Well, if you look closely at the picture, you'll see that you'll see that the hack rein is covered in tape.
Now, how is it that the riders get the horse to move about so violently?
Well, you all seen cowboy boots? So, you know how on the back there's a little bronze star called the spur? So, what we'll do is we'll drag that against the side of the horse. It's called braking. And that'll cause the horse to jump around or buck more vigorously. It doesn't really hurt the horse, it's just not a big fan.
And in your experience in the rodeo, is there any connection between a hack rein and a spur?
There's not.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about the case at hand today. How is it that you know Dakota Bourne?
I know Cody just from being involved in the rodeo. She joined the circuit just about 10 years ago, and I've gotten to know her fairly well since.
And do you see this person in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please identify the defendant?
She's wearing the black suit, the blue shirt, and the glasses.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my witness has correctly identified the defendant.
So good.
Thank you. Now, how is it that you knew Billy Joe Murray?
Same ways I know Dakota, Cody, just being involved in the rodeo.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the night of the hoedown. Were you at the hoedown?
I was the big old hoedown jamboree canvassing.
And who was there with you?
I recognize really everybody from the circuit.
Did you have any interactions with anybody in particular?
Mostly I just floated around, but I did have a brief conversation with Cody.
And what was this conversation about?
Well, Cody told me that she wasn't too happy about how she had drawn Sad Sally as her horse, because in bronc riding, the horse that you ride is it's picked randomly. So she had drawn Sad Sally, a much older horse, whereas Billy Joe had drawn Blue Head Fury, a much younger, more vibrant horse.
What's so important about which horse each rider picked?
Well, if you get an older horse, they're going to be a little more docile, whereas you get a younger horse, they're going to be bucking around much more violently.
Now, bringing the jury's attention back to the night of the hoedown, was everybody there all night?
No, I noticed that Cody, in fact, left early.
Where did the defendant go?
So I was ready to leave. I was on my way to my hotel room, and I decided to stop by the arena, and I saw Cody there.
And What was she doing?
Well, it looked to me that she just come out of
Objection,
town.
Your Honor. This is speculation. The witness does not know where the defendant or whoever he thought it was actually was. He said it looked to me.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
I'm simply asking this witness to use the knowledge that he has of the events of that night and his rational-based perception to testify to what he saw.
This witness is only certain that he saw someone standing in the middle of the tack room. He does not know where else this person was, so to offer the facts that it looked like they had just come from the tack room is speculative.
I'm going to sustain the objection. He started to say something about where that person had come from or was going to, but obviously he can testify to what he saw.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Also, Your Honor, may that part be stricken from the record?
That'd be stricken from the
Thank you.
After the hoedown, where is it that you went?
I went to the arena on my way back to my hotel room.
Did you see anybody there?
I saw Cody.
And did you happen to see her do anything there?
Yeah, I saw her slip something into her pocket.
What did she slip into her pocket?
Well, I first noticed it just because of the glare of the stadium lights, rather, and I saw that it was her knife.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about the next morning, August 6th. Did you see the defendant the morning of the Harrington Finals?
Yeah, I saw her.
What did you see her doing?
Well, I saw her kind of around Billy Joe's stall, which I found quite odd, and I saw her fiddle with some of Billy Joe's gear.
And in your experience in the rodeo, is it typical for riders to go near one another's equipment?
Not at all, unless there's an agreement between the two riders. Like, sometimes a friend will have another friend take care of their tack. Like, what's the situation with Billy Joe and Macy? Aside from that, it's very odd.
Now, what job did you have at the rodeo that day?
Just as always, I was a pickup rider.
And who were you assigned to?
I was assigned to Billy Joe that day.
Did you happen to see the fall of Billy Joe Murray?
I did. I had just come out into the arena to retrieve her from her horse, and she had fallen right in front of her.
And is it typical of Billy Joe Murray to fall off her horse?
I had never seen Billy Joe fall before that day.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. McGee. My name is Taylor Dade. I'm going to be asking some questions today.
Good afternoon.
Firstly, you say in your statement, quote, "Who could have thought that a soft-tilled dirt floor would be enough to crack a skull?" End quote. So rodeo deaths are quite rare, aren't they?
Objection, Your Honor. I would like to see a copy of what opposing counsel is asking the witness about.
I believe it's line 72 in Sean McGee's witness statement.
And
Does counsel have a copy of the statement?
yes, I do. And Your Honor, also, opposing counsel is testifying.
I didn't hear any testimony at the moment, but if you can rephrase your question, perhaps it'll go a little smooth.
And Mr. McGee, did you make a statement in this case?
Yes,
And did you tell the truth in making that statement?
of course I did.
And it is signed, is it not?
It is. But my middle signature on it.
Isn't it true that in that statement you say, quote, "Who could have thought that a soft-tilled dirt floor would be enough to crack a skull?" End quote. So rodeo deaths are quite rare, aren't they?
I did say that, and yeah, rodeo deaths are very rare.
And moving on to something you said in your direct examination, Mr. McGee. You said that Sad Sally was older and at the end of her career, but isn't it true that in this same witness statement you said that she was no dink, with the dink being a horse that does not buck vigorously?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound question.
Response.
I do not believe it was. I gave a definition. There's only one question.
Maybe you could ask the witness what a dink is.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What is a dink, Mr. McGee?
Well, a dink is a horse that just doesn't buck all that much.
And you said in your direct that Sad Sally was an old mare, isn't that right?
Yeah, she is. She had just been bought by the NCRA when I was just getting into the rodeo.
And isn't it true that in your witness statement you said she was no dink? Isn't that right?
I mean, yeah, she can still score you a couple points, but really doesn't change the fact that she's not going to buck anywhere near as much as like a Blue-Head Fury, for example.
But she is still a viable horse, isn't that right?
Yeah, you could score some decent points on Sad Sally.
Moving on to you personally, Mr. McGee. You're a convicted felon, isn't that right?
Yes, I,
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 4, 3 more prejudicial than probative, there's no probative value in this line of questioning, and it only goes to paint the jury's opinion of this witness.
Under Rule 6 and 9, Your Honor, all felony convictions are admissible given that they are within the past 10 years, which this crime is, which makes it more relevant than the
Your Honor, I find that this witness, especially for this witness, the past convictions are not relevant as they don't relate to the essential facts of the case today in helping to prove whether or not Dakota Warren is guilty.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I'm going to allow the testimony for impeachment purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You answered right. You are a convicted felon, that's true?
yes, back in 2013, about 7 years ago, I got hit with a drinking and driving charge.
And moving on to another crime, you've been convicted guilty of writing a fraudulent check, isn't that right?
Well, no, that was actually before the DUI. I wrote a check in the amount of $850. To be honest, I didn't know that I didn't have that much in my bank account, but I wrote the check, and then I'm informed that I did not have that money, but then I did eventually pay it in full.
And fraud is a crime of dishonesty, is it not?
Not sure, to be honest with you.
If I were to tell you that fraud is a crime of dishonesty, would you agree?
Objection, Your Honor. 602 lack of personal knowledge. This witness just testified to not knowing about this.
No response?
Withdrawn.
I'm sorry?
Withdrawn, Your Honor.
Withdrawn.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're the only person who claims to have seen Dakota Warren in the room that night, isn't that right?
Which night?
August 5th, the night of down.
I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I know I claim that I saw her because I saw her.
And the sighting was at night, isn't that right?
Yeah, it was just about 10 p.m.
And you say in your statement that you were 50 feet away from her, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And this arena was dimly lit, is that also true?
Yeah, it was somewhat dim, but the overhead lights were on. I could still see.
And it's from this 50-foot distance at night in the dimly lit arena that you say you saw her flip something shiny into her pocket, isn't that right?
Yeah, I saw her put her knife in her pocket. I mean, 50 feet, that's just about the distance from me to the end of the courtroom.
But at first you thought this object was a cell phone, isn't that true?
Yeah, upon first looking at it, I kind of assumed that it was a cell phone because, I mean, who doesn't carry a cell phone? Then I looked at it and I realized it was her knife.
Your Honor, may I approach witness and show what has been previously marked and admitted into evidence as Exhibit 12?
Would you like to reflect that on Sean?
No objection, Your Honor.
Can you look at that from me, Mr. McGee, please? Is that the knife that you saw?
It is.
Can you hold it up for the jury, please? You confused that object for a flip phone, is that right?
Well, yeah, you look at it, that does look kind of like an old flip phone. It's the same shape.
Sure, Mr. McGee. So, in the sighting, you didn't see Dakota in the tack room, did you?
No, it looked to me as though she had just come out of the tack room.
But you did not see her in the tack room, is that right?
No, I was standing outside, so I couldn't see.
And you did not see her cut any hack grain or any other ropes?
No, I just saw her in the arena.
No further questions, Your
Can we address?
Briefly, Your Honor. What is it that you saw Dakota Warren with the night of the go-down?
I saw her with this knife,
Are you certain that's what you saw?
100%.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. No further questions.
Any reports?
None of this time, Your Honor.
You sit down.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, prosecution calls Detective Sam Nye to the stand. And also, Your Honor, at this time, prosecution asks for a time check. You have 10 minutes and 5 seconds. Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Remind you that you're in the room.
Of course.
Please state your name
My name is Detective Sam Nye.
What do you do for a living?
I currently work as a detective for the Harrington Police Department, and since completing my vigorous training, I'm also a Class 1 CSI investigator.
What sparked your interest in becoming a detective?
When I was a kid, I was quite the cinephile. My favorite character of all time, Sherlock Holmes. So I decided to follow in his footsteps and become a detective.
Do you have any other experience outside of law enforcement?
I do. A few years ago, I joined the Army. It caused a little bit of tension in the household at first because my dad's a Navy man.
What have you accomplished in the Army?
When I was deployed in Iraq, I trained as a forensics special agent. And I received the best training you can possibly get. You know what they say, you can't get any better than the Army.
Have you received any degrees that proved pertinent in this investigation?
Yes, I have. A few years ago, I earned a degree in psychology from the University of Delaware with a minor in forensic studies.
Now, how long have you been in this line of work?
I've been in law enforcement for about 23 years, so longer than most of these kids have been alive.
And how many cases would you say you've investigated?
Since my time at Harrington, I've investigated about 75 crime scenes, I would say, about 30 of which were homicides.
How did you get involved with this specific case?
I was the detective dispatched to the scene the night of August 6th.
Why were you the professional selected?
When I was a kid, I was involved in the junior rodeo circuit, so because of that background, as well as experience and training working with ropes and forensic analysis of those ropes, discerning whether they've been frayed or cut, because of that background, I was chosen to be dispatched.
Could you elaborate on your course of action when you arrived at the scene?
Of course. The first thing that I did was speak to Miss Ripley Kerr, because she was the individual who contacted the police department, and at that time she handed over a hat ring, which belonged to Billy Joe Murray, which I visually examined.
What did you do next?
I traveled to the hospital so I could speak with Miss Billy Joe Murray prior to her death.
Did you get this opportunity?
I did.
What condition was Miss Murray in at the time that you were speaking with her?
It was obvious that she was very near her death. We were all informed from the doctor, and she even said so herself.
Now, what were the statements made in this conversation?
Billy Joe Murray said that Dakota Boren told her that it would be her final ride, and for that reason, Dakota Boren became a possible suspect.
After the hospital, where did you take your investigation next?
I traveled back to the arena where I surveyed the scene, interviewed witnesses, and I also conducted various forensic examinations.
Who were the witnesses that you interviewed?
I interviewed Ripley Kerr, Sean McGee, Macy Henry, and Dakota Boren.
Were these interviews helpful in your investigation?
Absolutely. Each and every single one of these interviews proved extremely pertinent to my eventual conclusion.
Let's begin with Miss Ripley Kerr. How did this interview go?
Ms. Kerr works as the vice president for the NCRA, and this basically means that she was aware of the competition and also its operations.
What else did you learn from this interview?
Ms. Kerr informed me of a fierce rivalry between Dakota Boren and Billy Joe Murray, which meant that Dakota Boren would have had motive to commit this crime.
Moving on to Mr. McGee. How did this interview go?
Mr. McGee was an eyewitness of Dakota Boren the night prior to competition.
As an eyewitness, what did Mr. McGee see?
Mr. McGee saw Dakota Boren alone in the arena at night, which is quite odd, and he said that he saw Miss Boren with a pocket knife, all near the equipment room, which is where tack is kept. And for that reason, that meant that Dakota Boren also had opportunity to commit this crime.
Now, why are you interviewing Miss Henry?
Miss Henry was the best friend of Billy Joe Murray, who is the deceased in this party, as well as she also was a suspect at one time.
And could you once again elaborate on what you learned from this interview?
Well, Miss Henry furthered the opinion of the fierce rivalry between Billy Joe Murray and Dakota Boren, and she also informed me of another instance in which Dakota Boren had access and was possibly tampering with Miss Billy Joe Murray's equipment.
Finally, how did your interview go with the defendant?
Dakota Boren seemed a little bit agitated, almost anxious during her interview. She was pausing significant periods of time in between the questions that I asked and the answers that she gave.
Did you gain anything else from this interview?
I did. She handed over her pocket knife once I asked about it.
Did you run any tests on this pocket knife?
I did. The first thing that I noticed about the pocket knife was when I opened up the blade, there were 2 strands of sisal fiber in the handle or the sheath of this knife. And this was the same material that made up Billy Joe Murray's severed hack ring. So for that reason, I extracted the samples and later compared them to the hack ring.
Did you run any other tests on the pocket knife?
I did. Once I was done with the handle, I moved on to the blade, where I was running chemical examinations looking for adhesive residue.
Were you able to find this adhesive residue?
I did not find a piece of residue, but I did find rubbing alcohol, which I found quite strange.
In your expert opinion, why was the finding of rubbing alcohol strange?
Well, I've worked with knives fairly extensively through my military career as well as my law enforcement career. I personally have never used rubbing alcohol to clean a blade except to remove some sort of sticky substance, but I included it in my investigation because it made the lack of adhesive a non-factor.
Reflecting back to the SEHS fibers you mentioned earlier, what were your expert conclusions that came out of the examinations of these?
I compared the sisal fibers found in Dakota Bourne's knife to the hack grain used by Billy Joe Murray under 200 times magnification. Now that's about 100 times stronger than Sherlock's magnifying glass. And the two samples were visually identical.
Did you examine any other equipment?
I did. I also looked at the entirety of Miss Murray's hack grain under the same magnification.
And once again, Detective, could you elaborate on these findings?
Of course. Now, the hack grain itself seemed to be in pretty good condition. I didn't see any reason why it should have broken on its own. But when I got to the area of separation, under a layer of torn tape was a very clean and crisp cut. And this meant that it was deliberately cut by a very sharp object like a knife, and then taped over to conceal the crime.
Now, using this vast amount of evidence, who were your main suspects in this investigation?
My main suspects were Macy Henry and Dakota Bourne.
How were you able to narrow it down?
I was able to eliminate Macy Henry as a suspect because, frankly, she had an alibi for the time that I determined it most likely that the hack grain had been severed. And her behavior also seemed appropriate of someone whose best friend had just passed away suddenly.
Once identifying Dakota Bourne as your prime and only suspect, what did you do next?
I arrested Dakota Bourne for the murder of Billy Joe Murray.
Did you hear Ms. Dakota Bourne say anything at the time of her arrest?
I did. She gave some alarming comments after her Miranda warning.
Objection, Your Honor. I would move to strike the word alarming as it's more prejudicial than probative under Rule 403.
Your Honor, I will re-ask your question as this. That would be great.
We'll strike that. You can re-ask your question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, did you hear anything? That Ms. Bourne told you or said during the time of her arrest?
I did. After she was given her Miranda warning, she did give some comments that supported my conclusion.
Now, what were these comments?
She said, and I quote, "Y'all can't prove nothing." And then she also said that she never meant to hurt anyone.
Now, just for clarification for the jury, why did you arrest Dakota Bourne?
I arrested Dakota Bourne because multiple witnesses gave her a source of motive and opportunity. All of the forensic examinations pointed to Miss Bourne's knife being the object to deliberately sever Billy Joe Murray's hack grain prior to concealing that with a layer of tape. And the statements made at the time of Miss Bourne's arrest only corroborated that conclusion.
Thank you for your time, Detective. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Detective Nye. I'm going to be asking you a few questions today.
Good afternoon.
So upon your arrival at the state fairgrounds, isn't it true that the very first person you spoke to was a Miss Ripley Kerr, the head of the rodeo?
That is correct, and at that time she handed over a hack grain.
And through your interview with Miss Kerr, isn't it true that you learned of a rivalry that existed between Dakota Bourne and Billy Joe Murray?
Yes, that is correct. As I understand it, it was quite fierce.
So you heard about this rivalry at the very beginning of your investigation, is that correct?
That is correct.
After finishing up your interview with Ms. Kerr, isn't it true that you went on to do an initial examination of some of Billy Joe Murray's equipment, including her hack grain?
Yes, I visually examined it at that time.
And from this visual examination, you say in your witness statement that you had determined that the rain had been intentionally cut. Is that correct?
Yes, that was my initial observation. It was fairly obvious because it was under a layer of torn tape, whereas the cut under the layer of torn tape was very crisp, meaning that in order for this to have been torn, the layer under the tape would have looked identical to the tape on the top, which was not consistent.
But you made this analysis without any forensics or fiber investigation at that time. Is that correct?
No, and that was not my conclusion at that time. That was my initial observation. I later corroborated with the conclusion.
But at the time you made the observation, you did not have the forensics to corroborate that. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered. Opposing counsel has already asked this question and received an appropriate answer.
Your Honor, I was just trying to clarify for the jury as I believe that he did not clearly answer my question.
Any other response?
stand by my objection, Your Honor.
Okay. But maybe rephrase the question. I'm going to sustain that objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, you made your initial assessment that Billy Joe Murray's hacking had been deliberately cut before examining the rain in your lab. Is that correct?
Right, it was my initial observation, and I later corroborated that with scientific evidence.
So after this, you went on to interview a couple more witnesses. You interviewed a Mr. Sean McGee, who was a pickup rider. Isn't it true that at this time, Mr. McGee shared with you a story about seeing Dakota
Objection,
Boring?
Your Honor. Opposing counsel is testifying.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm really trying to contextualize for the jury and for this witness the path of my questioning, as well under mock trial rule 4.3, leading questions are allowed on cross-examination, and I'm really trying to lead my witness through the points that I'm trying to hit.
Counsel, is this inconsistent with the statement from Mr. McGee?
No, it's not.
Okay. I'm going to overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So isn't it true that upon interviewing Mr. McGee, who was a rodeo hand at the rodeo, he told you a story about seeing Dakota Boring in the middle of the arena the night before the competition during the hoedown?
Right, with a pocket knife.
So about this pocket knife, isn't it true that the first time Mr. McGee relayed this story to you, he said that he saw a flash of silver, it looked like a cell phone, he wasn't really sure what it was?
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 801 hearsay, this statement is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
May I respond, Your Honor? My first way to address this would be that opposing counsel opened the door to this line of questioning on their direct examination as they extensively referred to the interviews done by Detective Nye. I would also say that this, under Rule 801, this is not hearsay, as I'm not trying to admit this for the truth of the matter asserted. I'm really trying to establish the information that Mr. Nye was using to draw his conclusions in this case.
Your response.
Your Honor, I would say that these are being offered for the truth of the matter because whether or not these statements are true goes to the witness today.
Okay. I'm going to overrule the objection at this time. You can proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So isn't it true that at first when Mr. McGee relayed this story to you, he said he saw Dakota Boring take a flash of silver, it looked like a pocket knife, but he was not really sure what it was?
The first point he mentioned was that he saw a cell phone, and then he told me that it was a pocket knife.
But isn't it true that he only changed his story from cell phone to pocket knife after he heard that the rain could have been deliberately cut?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge. This witness would have no knowledge if the other witness changed his story.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I would refer opposing counsel to page 16 of this witness's witness statement from lines 84 to 86. Mr. Nye clearly says that he has this knowledge and talks about how his initial interview with McGee versus later on in the interview, Mr. McGee shared different stories with him.
I stand by my objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time.
Thank you, Your
Your
Honor.
So isn't it true that in your statement you said, and I'm quoting, "In my initial interview, McGee told me that at first he thought it looked like Boren was carrying a shiny cell phone, but after hearing about the possibility that Murray's hack ring was cut, he was certain it was a knife." Is that correct?
Right, that is correct. He had originally told me that it was a cell phone, and then he later said it was a pocket knife. I'm not sure when he made that distinction. He could have made it prior to talking to me, but I'm really not sure when he changed his mind. Do you want to clarify that?
But isn't it true that in your statement you say that when you initially interviewed him, he told you it was a cell phone, and only after he heard that Murray's hack ring could have been cut, it was a knife? Isn't that correct?
It was all in the same interview. He first told me that it was a cell phone, and later on he did tell me it was a knife. I'm not sure when he made that distinction in his mind, but as far as I know, the statement was made after I told him that Dakota Moore was a possible suspect, but I'm not sure when he reached that conclusion on his own.
Okay. So after that, you went on to interview the two people who become your prime suspects in this case, Macy Henry and Dakota Boren. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you started out with Miss Henry. Isn't it true that Miss Henry was the last person to touch Billy Joe Murray's gear before her final ride, besides Billy Joe Murray herself?
As far as I'm aware, yes, which I understand it is not uncommon, as Macy Henry often took care of Billy Joe Murray's equipment.
And in your interview with Miss Henry, isn't it true that she told you she was at the hoedown all night?
Miss Henry did tell me that.
And isn't it true that you considered this to be an alibi, as you believe that the time the ring was most likely cut was during the hoedown the night before?
That is correct. Based on practice schedules, it was most likely that the hack rate had been severed prior to the events wrapping up the night prior to competition, and in between the events that Billie Joe Murray eventually took her ride, meaning that that would be the night prior to competition. And Macy Henry did testify to being at the hoedown, meaning that she would not have had access to that equipment at that time.
However, although Macy Henry testified to being at the hoedown, isn't it true that none of the other witnesses you interviewed can confirm Miss Henry's alibi?
I'm not sure, but she testified to that, yes.
But isn't it true that, according to your own interview notes in your statement, that none of the witnesses you interviewed can confirm Miss Henry's presence at the hoedown all night?
Right, that is correct. No other witness testified to being present at the hoedown the whole night, and therefore couldn't support that conclusion.
And then you went on to interview Miss Dakota Boren. Now, isn't it true that Miss Boren was under no obligation to speak with you and did so entirely of her own free will?
Yes.
And you note in your interview notes that Miss Boren was cooperative with you, that she answered all of your questions fully, even added some unsolicited detail. Do you still agree with that assessment?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound question.
Your Honor, again, I'm merely trying to lead the witness to the point that I'm trying to make. All of these are in his witness statement and contained there, and as these are all on one topic of Ms. Boren's general cooperation, I would argue this is not a compound question.
Your Honor, if I may add, I don't believe that opposing counsel argued my objection because she asked a question which contained multiple questions in the same question.
I'm going to sustain the objection, perhaps split your question into multiple.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So isn't it true that you note in your interview notes that Ms. Boren was cooperating fully with you?
She was fully cooperative, although she didn't always seem happy about it.
So talking about these demeanors that you observed, you said she was agitated,
Yes, she was pacing back and forth constantly.
and you said she also would not make eye contact with you,
Right.
and that she paused before some of her answers.
She did. It was a significant pause in between the questions that I asked her and often the answers that she gave.
Isn't it true that your interview with Ms. Boren took place on the very same day she discovered the tragic death of her fellow competitor?
I guess you could say that. I'm not sure when she found out.
Isn't it also true that you had never met or spoken with Dakota Boren before this interview?
That is true.
So you didn't have a benchmark for her normal behavior, did you?
No, I didn't, but I would classify her behavior as out of the ordinary, and it didn't prove extremely pertinent to my eventual conclusion. That was just my initial perception of her behavior.
And also through your interview with Ms. Boren, isn't it true that she surrendered to you her pocket knife as well as allowing you to search her motel room?
One
Objection,
problem,
Your Honor.
yes.
Compound question. Opposing counsel has once again asked two questions in the same statement.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time and allow her to continue.
Thank you.
So isn't it true that through your interview with Ms. Boren, she allowed you to collect her pocket knife to search her evidence as well as search her hotel room?
Once prompted, yes.
And isn't it true that you didn't have a warrant for either of these things?
No, I didn't. She allowed me to do it, so I didn't need a warrant.
But she had no obligation to allow you, is that correct?
Right, that doesn't affect the fact that I did not need a warrant because she allowed me to do so.
So you examined Ms. Boren's hotel room. You also say in your statement you examined Ms. Murray's hotel room. Isn't it true that you never examined Macy Henry's hotel room?
That is correct.
And isn't it true, according to your own interview notes, you never even asked to see Macy Henry's hotel room?
No, I inspected her truck.
And isn't it also true that according to your interview notes once again, although you asked Ms. Boren if she had a pocket knife, you never asked Ms. Henry if she had a knife?
Right, I asked Ms. Bourne if she had a pocket knife because of the statements that I received from Sean McGee. There was never any prior witness statements claiming that Macy Henry had a knife, so I didn't find it necessary to ask that.
So now let's talk about your examination of the forensic evidence in this case. You talked about your expertise on direct examination. However, isn't it true that none of your expertise is specific to rodeo equipment or hack reins?
I guess you could say that. I trained extensively in the rope care, but it did particularly pertain to sailing ropes. But I did take specific qualifications and testing as far as discerning between when ropes had been deliberately cut and when they had been frayed.
So your assessment of Ms. Murray's hack rein upon your examination in your lab was that the rein had been partially cut and then frayed during the ride, and isn't that correct?
That is correct. In addition to reaching that conclusion about Ms. Murray's hack rein, I also purchased a control hack rein, which I repeated what I believed to be the events based on the cut, and I later determined that the two samples were consistent.
When you say consistent, isn't it true that in your witness statement you say that you found results that were similar but not identical?
Right, because they were not the same hack rein.
So now let's talk about your examination of the tape that you found on Ms. Murray's hack rein. You say that you felt the top layer was ripped and the bottom layer was cut. Is that correct?
Right, it was my determination that there were two separate layers of tape. On top of the original hat grain, there was a layer of deliberately cut tape, and then wrapped on top of that was a brand new layer of tape which tore throughout her ride.
And you made this assessment. However, isn't it true that you did not do any experimenting with controlled tape to confirm your theory about the tape?
No, I didn't need to. I was very sure about my conclusion.
And so finally, let's talk about your examination of Miss Bourne's knife. You said that you found sisal fibers in this knife that were identical to the fibers in Miss Bourne's hat grain. Is that correct?
Yes, the size of fibers were identical, and I did this under 200 times magnification. Just for clarification, that would be the same as determining the difference between two different hair follicles, and the two samples were visually identical.
However, isn't it true that the sisal fibers, although identical to the ones in Miss Murray's hat grain, would also be identical to any other sisal fiber in any other piece of sisal rope?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge. This witness would have no knowledge of any other sisal fibers because he did not examine these.
May I respond, Your Honor? This witness has been tendered as an expert in forensics with specific focus in fibers, and therefore I feel that within the scope of his knowledge to answer this question based on his own expert opinion.
Your Honor, if I may add, this witness has not testified to his experience with specifically sisal fibers, and as well as if he would know whether or not these specific sisal fibers would be identical to other of the same kind. Thank you, Your Honor.
So, isn't it true, Detective Nye, that the sisal fibers you found in Miss Bourne's knife would be identical to any other sisal fiber in any other piece of sisal rope?
One could say that. Throughout my investigation, I determined that not only were the two samples visually identical to Miss Murray's hat grain, the samples that I found in Macy Henry's truck were also identical, which I determined originated from Miss Murray's hat grain. But that didn't prove pertinent to my investigation, as it would make sense that there would be fibers present in Miss Henry's truck because she often took care of that equipment.
But isn't it true that you admit in your statement that you cannot use these fibers to forensically link Dakota Bourne to this crime?
Not by themselves, no. It was the culmination of the evidence, along with the evidence that I obtained through witness testimony, that I was able to make my eventual conclusion.
So you could not draw any conclusions from finding these fibers, is that correct?
Not the fibers alone, but I was able to use the culmination of the evidence.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
May I redirect?
Very briefly, Your Honor. Detective, who are your main suspects in this investigation?
My main suspects were Macy Henry and Dakota Bourne.
Could you once again elaborate on how you were able to narrow it down?
Well, I was able to eliminate Macy Henry as a suspect because she had an alibi during the time that I determined it most likely that the hat grain had been severed the night prior, as I said, as well as her behavior seemed appropriate of someone whose best friend had just died suddenly, and that was not consistent with Dakota Bourne, both the alibi and her behavior.
Why was the behavior of the defendant odd in this interview?
Well, she seemed quite anxious, and a not guilty person would not have a reason to be anxious at that point.
Objection, Your Honor. I move to strike this witness's testimony as under Rule 704. This goes to the ultimate issue.
Your Honor, in the witness's direct, I lay foundation that he has a degree in psychology and would therefore be able to testify to the witness's state of mind during the interview.
I stand by my objection, Your Honor, to imply the defendant's guilt or lack thereof clearly falls under Rule 704, and I ask that it be stricken from the record.
Okay, I'm going to sustain the objection at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, just one final question, Detective. Why did you arrest Dakota Bourne?
I arrested Dakota Bourne because multiple witnesses testified for her having a source of motive and opportunity. All of the forensic evidence pointed to Miss Bourne's knife being the object who deliberately severed Billy Joe Murray's hat grain, and the statements made at the time of Miss Bourne's arrest only corroborated that very conclusion.
Thank you, Detective. Thank you, Your Honor, for this question.
Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
Sit down.
Thank you.
Does the prosecution rest?
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution rests our case in chief.
We'll take a 3-minute recess in place so that you can gather your thoughts for your case in chief.
Your Honor,
Defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Ripley Kerr to the stand.
Okay. Mr. Levy, you can swear.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kerr. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello everyone, my name is Ripley Kerr.
What's your occupation?
I am the Vice President of the NCRA, which is the National Co-ed Rodeo Association, and I am also the proud founder and owner of Yiffy Rodeos, and I've been personally producing rodeos for about 10 years now.
What does the NCRA do?
So we basically try to bring together skilled men and women to compete in rodeo competitions, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy my job.
How do those rodeo competitions work?
So the goal is for the rider to stay on top of the bucking horse for as long as they can. The longer you stay on, the better it looks in front of the judges, so the more points you can get added to your total score.
Do the riders get to choose the horses that they ride?
No, the horse draw, it's a total blind draw. Of course, some competitors will want harder horses to ride to make them look better, but like I said before, they don't know what horse they're getting.
Are you familiar with which horse Billy Joe Murray was on the day of her incident?
Billy Joe was riding a horse called Blue Hen Fury.
Then earlier you mentioned that you have a rodeo production company. So how do you promote your rodeos?
Well, I would definitely try to promote the rodeos through different sources of media, like newspapers and ads, and I won't lie, I did try to boost the rivalry between Dakota Bourne and Billy Joe Murray, just because I wanted the crowd to have a fun story to follow the night of the competition, so
Do you inflate it to be more intense than it was for the media?
yes, correct.
What do you know about this rivalry?
Well, I've known both of the competitors for several years. The Bourne family, they're full of great people. And Billy Joe, she was very talented, but she would also kind of get into, she would make a lot of enemies in the rodeo community. She would kind of get into different altercations with people, including some levels of authority like the judges.
Okay, moving on to this rodeo season in question, how would a rider win the entire season?
You would have to score the most points throughout the whole season, and that could ultimately help you to win the scholarship as well as the buckle. The buckle in the rodeo world is kind of like a trophy.
Were you present at the rodeo the day of August 6th?
Yes, I was.
How did the events of that rodeo proceed?
So Billy Joe came out at about 3 o'clock for her ride. She got into her accident, and of course we didn't think anything was majorly wrong. But we still had the paramedics come, and then after that, Dakota Bourne rode, and she did a great job. She kind of just took the horrific accident that happened to Billy Joe and put on a really good show for the crowd.
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 701, this is speculation. This witness is speculating as to the mindset of another person.
Respond. Which person would that be, counsel?
This witness is speculating as to Dakota Bourne's mindset during her ride, Your Honor.
When was that?
During her ride after Billy Joe's fall, this witness was
You're going to
talking.
address the court, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm confused as to where she mentioned the mindset. I believe she was talking about, like, not Dakota's specific mindset, but just described Dakota's ride.
Your Honor, if I may. The witness was clearly talking about Billy Joe's ride and how that affected Dakota Bourne's mindset going into her ride. And this is speculation, as she cannot know the mindset of another person.
Okay. I'm going to rule the objection. I think the witness was testifying about what she perceived, so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question?
If you could, please.
So how did the events of the August 6th rodeo proceed?
Like I said, Billy Joe, she rode at 3 o'clock. She got into her accident, and then we called the paramedics. After that, Cody Bourne rode, and she did a great job, and the crowd really enjoyed the show that she put on in front of everyone.
So what, if anything, did you do after Miss Murray had been hurt?
Well, after she was hurt, about an hour after Billy Joe's accident, she was then taken to the hospital. After that, I called the police to report for insurance purposes, and then after that, I took Billy Joe's remaining gear and put it in her tack room.
And so once his officers arrived at the scene, what did you do next?
Well, one of the detectives, Sam Nye, he kind of made me feel as if he was kind of accusatory towards myself and the NCRA with our security and riding with faulty riding equipment, and I explained to him that we had never had any issues at the NCRA with our security. We kind of believe in the honor system. No one is allowed in another person's area without their permission, and this has never been an issue before. And if a competitor does go into someone else's room, they're basically messing it up for themselves overall.
Did the officers show you anything while they were on the scene?
Yes, they showed me Billy Joe's hack ring, and right where the Honda was, it was broken, so that was ultimately what led Billy Joe to her tragic death. So I really feel for her family and friends right now.
have accidents and incidents like this that result in death and injury happen during your time in the rodeo?
No, in my 10 years of being a part of the NCRA, there have been no career-ending injuries or deaths until now.
No further questions.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Kerr, you just said that you called the police for insurance purposes, right?
Yes, I did. I called the police to report for insurance purposes.
But that's not the entire reason you called the police, is it?
If you could fill me in on what you mean by that.
Well, you actually contacted the police because you thought Billy Joe's hat grain didn't look right.
Yes, I mean, I believe that it didn't look right. That is correct.
And you're familiar with rodeo equipment and ropes and things.
Yes.
In fact, you've seen sisal rope fray multiple times before, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I've seen some rodeo gear in my days, yes.
And so you know what it looks like when a rope frays?
Yes.
But, Ms. Kerr, in your opinion, Billy Joe's hat grain had been cut.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is not an expert and cannot testify to their opinion about if this rope had been cut or not.
Your Honor, if I may, the witness has just testified to having a basis of foreknowledge of whether ropes have been frayed or cut, as she has seen frayed ropes before, and I'm asking her to use her rationally based perception to differentiate.
I think the question as to whether the rope has been cut is a debate between the experts of the prosecution and defense, so I don't think this witness is qualified to offer her opinion on if the rope had been cut.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Kerr, to clarify, you have backgrounds looking at ropes and things?
I mean, I think if I see a rope and I see if it's frayed or torn, I can tell that there's something wrong with it.
Right, and in your opinion, you could tell that this rein had been cut.
Yes, it looked like it had been cut, correct.
And on direct, you said that the police showed you where the rein was broken,
Yes, that is correct, and I did say that on direct.
but they showed you where it was cut.
Yes, the police showed me, correct.
And now, Ms. Kerr, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the security at the NCRA.
Sure.
You don't have locks in the equipment area, do you?
No, we don't. Like I said earlier, we kind of believe in the honor system, and we've never had any issues with this before, so I don't really feel like we need to implement any security issues if nothing's been wrong prior to this.
I appreciate that, and just to clarify, you don't have cameras or any type of security monitoring back there, correct?
No, we do not.
So you would agree with me that it would be entirely possible for one rider to go into another rider's area if they so chose?
It would be possible, but if anything, me being the vice president, I'm sure I would hear someone talk to me about it if there was ever an issue, and if something like that did happen, they would be ejected from the competition, so.
But you don't have any security measures preventing a rider from doing that, do you?
We do not have any security, but we do, the riders are well aware of these rules, and they are supposed to follow them.
So that's a no. You have no security measures preventing a rider from doing that.
We do not have security that is put in place with cameras.
Now, your rodeo association gives out a rodeo scholarship each year, right?
Yes, that's correct.
In the total amount of $120,000, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that leading into the Harrington Finals of the 2019 season, both the defendant and Billy Joe Murray were finalists for that scholarship?
Yes, that is correct, and I'm very proud of the scholarship. It can provide tons of different fees for college, like book fees and other things, so it's a nice scholarship.
And to clarify, Billy Joe was in first place while the defendant was in second.
Yes, and then Macy Henry will be in third, most likely.
And you're familiar with their rivalry, right?
Yes, correct.
And you're also responsible for marketing for the rodeo, that's right?
Yes, I would definitely try to put it out to people all around so I could get a good crowd to watch the show and the rivalry between the two riders. They're really good competitors.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to approach the witness with what has been previously entered as Exhibit 3. Let the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel. Now, Ms. Kirk, this is an article from the Delaware State News regarding the Harrington Finals, correct?
Correct, yes.
Now, I'd like to direct you to the right-hand column of this article, the top paragraph of that column. I'm going to read the bottom 3 lines, and I would ask you to read along with me in your head. For Bourne to secure enough points to win, Murray will have to be disqualified. Neither Murray nor Bourne have failed to score at an NCRA event this season. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And now I'm going to direct you to the paragraph immediately below that. I'm going to read the last two sentences of that paragraph, beginning with "not if I have." I would ask you to read along with me in your head. "Not if I have anything to say about it," declares Cody Boren. "I mean to win this one, for me and for my dad, no matter what it takes." Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did read it correctly.
Objection, Your Honor. I would object to the contents of this article being admitted today as the author is not present in court today and is not verified.
Your Honor, if I may. This exhibit is already entered into evidence. In addition, its authenticity and admissibility is stipulated in today's case.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Your Honor, I'm just referring to this paragraph as the double hearsay, as the author is quoting someone else and is not here to be subject to cross-examination.
Your Honor, if I may. Stipulation 10 of today's case says that the authenticity and admissibility of this document is stipulated, and opposing counsel has already agreed with it.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time.
Thank you.
Ms. Boren is here for cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Kerr, you've said previously that you're familiar with the rivalry between the defendant and Billy Joe Murray.
Yes, they were both very good competitors with one another.
And you know of a confrontation that they had in July, 1 month before the Harrington Finals?
Yes, that is correct.
And you know that during that confrontation, the defendant pulled a knife on Billy Joe Murray. Isn't that right?
She pulled out her father's closed pocket knife. It was not open, but it was closed, but yes, correct.
So that's a yes. During a confrontation with Billy Joe Murray, the defendant pulled a knife.
Objection, Your Honor. This question was answered by the witness, so it doesn't need to be re-asked.
Your Honor, I'm just clarifying her answer for the jury.
Asked and answered, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Kerr, you would agree with me that pulling a knife in the middle of an argument would be a threatening action, right?
I mean, knowing Dakota and her family history and with her father, I'm sure she meant nothing of it. I know she keeps the knife close
Objection,
to
Your
her.
Honor. This question calls for speculation, and the response was speculative.
Your Honor, I was merely asking in the witness's personal experience and her rationally based perception if pulling a knife in the middle of an argument would be a threatening action. This requires no expertise. It can be reasonably inferred.
It's a hypothetical, Your Honor.
I'm going to overrule the objection at this time.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Kerr, you would agree with me that pulling a knife in the middle of an argument is a threatening action regardless of who it is or how you feel about their family.
I mean, knowing Dakota the way I do and her family history, I know that she meant nothing of it. She keeps the pocket knife close with her because of her father.
Ms. Kerr, I'm not asking you about the defendant's family. I am asking you, is pulling a knife in the middle of an argument a threatening action?
I guess you could take it that way. Some people might take it differently.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. No further questions, Your Honor.
Agree?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor.
Was that knife that you spoke about on the cross-examination open or closed?
The knife, it was closed.
And are you primarily active with the executive aspects of rodeos or something else?
I would definitely, could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Are you probably active with the executive aspects of running rodeos or something else?
I definitely try to take care of the different things that go on in the rodeos, like promotions and getting people in charge of the seats and other stuff like that, like maintenance for the competition.
So are you often down on the floor interacting with the ropes and saddles with the riders?
No, I'm definitely more interacting with what's going on behind the scenes, like if everybody's getting to their seats and making sure all the ads are hung up or whatever, or everything's in the paper.
And, when you looked at the rope, was that with your bare eyes?
Correct.
You didn't look through any microscope?
No.
And you don't have any degree in forensics?
No, I have a degree in marketing from the University of Texas.
Do you have forensic experience?
No, I don't.
No further. Actually, what is the security system that you have in place at the rodeos?
Like I said earlier, the NCRA, we believe in the honor system. No one is allowed in another person's area without another person's permission. If they do this, they will be ejected from the competition. And if they do go in another competitor's area, they're basically risking it for themselves. They will be ejected and not allowed to ride at the competition.
Are there incidents with tampering that occur at the rodeos?
No.
No further questions.
Mayor Rose.
Briefly, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Kerr, I appreciate your honor system, but you don't have any physical security measures, do you?
No, and there has never been an issue until now, so I don't feel as if me being a main part of the NCRA, why would we implement something that doesn't need to be done right now?
And Ms. Kerr, you are familiar with the way that ropes look when they're frayed, right?
I think anybody can look at a rope and if it's frayed, then they'll notice something's different about it.
And your opinion is that Billy Joe's hack ring was not frayed, but cut.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, should I leave this up here?
You can take it, thanks, okay. Take it.
Your Honor, the defense calls for the Belmont to stand. Good evening, Mr. Belmont. Can you please state your full name and occupation for the court?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sidney Belmont, and I'm the Vice President of Operations at Rodeo Equipment Incorporated. Today, I hope to provide you all with some information on rodeo equipment, and enlighten the court.
Do you have any personal experience with rodeos?
Yes, I do. I truly enjoy rodeos. I've been attending them my entire life, and now by job I get to attend about 10 to 12 a year.
Do you have a curriculum vitae or resume?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, may I proceed to the previously marked as Exhibit 11? Let the record reflect on showing opposing counsel.
No objection, John.
Mr. Belmont, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do. This is my curriculum vitae or resume.
Did you create this document?
Yes, I did.
And is it a true and accurate copy of the one you created?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move to Exhibit 11 into evidence.
Without objection, be admitted.
No objection, Your Honor.
So with reference to this document, can you tell us a little bit about your education, Mr. Belmont?
So I received my Bachelor's of Science in Industrial Engineering from the University of Penn State. I also received my Master's from there as well. Currently, I'm an adjunct professor at the School of Engineering at Penn State. In addition to my schooling there, I've taken over 50 hours of extensive safety training courses based on rodeo equipment and equipment care, and each year I teach a course on this.
Now, can we talk a little bit about your professional experience at Rodeo Equipment Incorporated?
So I started working with Rodeo Equipment Incorporated shortly after I graduated. When I first started out at the company, I was just a regular engineer on the team. Then I became the chief engineer of Rain Production. Then I was the senior production engineer, and currently I'm the vice president.
And what does this company do?
Rodeo Equipment Incorporated is the largest manufacturer of saddles and other rodeo equipment in the Mid-Atlantic region. They've been in this business for over 50 years.
Do you have any personal achievements through your career that you feel would be relevant to share with the court?
Well, in addition to my work with the company, I've also completed jobs such as helping to develop a new polymer used in the manufacturing of hat grains, as well as invented new machinery used in the cutting of hat grains.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness before in court?
Yes, I've testified as an expert witness in 10 other court cases. I'm getting paid today, and I've also gotten paid for my other court cases as well.
Did all these cases have anything in common?
All of these cases involve the rodeo industry.
So let's transition to the case we're here to talk about today. How did you prepare to give your testimony today?
In preparation for today's case, I read all of the witness statements, the police reports, as well as examined all of the evidence provided to me.
What evidence was provided to you?
I examined Ms. Warren's knife, as well as the hack ring used by Ms. Murray.
So let's start with Ms. Bourne's knife. Can you tell us about your examination of the knife?
So, along with my examination of the blade of the knife, there were 2 sisal fibers with Ms. Bourne's knife. Although these sisal fibers, like Mr. Nye said, were consistent with that of the hack ring used by Ms. Murray, they're also consistent with any other sisal fiber. Sisal is a very common material, and it's used in the agricultural industry, especially in hay baling.
In your expert opinion, sisal fibers in Ms. Bourne's knife could have come from Ms. Bourne's own hack ring?
Well, it's my knowledge that Ms. Bourne uses a polysisal ring, so it contains both poly and sisal fibers. Because of this, it's very likely that it could have come from her own ring, yes.
Is it possible to say where these fibers came from?
Well, due to the small sample size of the fibers and the fact that sisal is such a common material, there is no direct way to say where these fibers came from exactly.
So now let's talk about your examination of Ms. Murray's hack ring. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness who has been previously admitted as Exhibits 15 and 16. Let the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel.
No objections, Your Honor.
Mr. Belmont, with reference to these documents, can you tell us about any theories you may have about Billy Joe Murray's hack ring?
Well, when I conducted my thorough analysis of Ms. Murray's hack ring, based off of my observations, I was able to come up with 3 theories of what could or could not have happened to the room.
What are these theories?
My first theory is that it was partially cut. My second theory is that the ring was completely cut and then taped back together. And my third theory is that it wasn't even cut at all.
So let's talk about this partially cut theory, which, as we heard earlier, is also Detective Nye's theory. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes. Contrary to Mr. Nye's theory, the partially cut theory, a microscopic examination of the ring revealed that it could be classified as either cut or frayed. In addition to this, I believe that the partially cut theory is the least likely theory. If a ring is partially cut, it's true that it would unravel, but in order for it to unravel, someone would have had to know exactly how far to cut the rope so that it appears normal, but still frays and breaks apart during the short time in Ms. Murray's ride.
So would you disagree with Detective Nye's assessment?
Respectfully, I have to disagree, yes.
So now let's talk about your second theory, the completely cut theory.
So if the ring was completely cut and then taped back together, it's more likely that pressure could have been applied to that easier and it could have broken apart during the short time of the ride.
And now let's talk about your third theory, the ring wasn't even cut at all.
So, as Ms. Henry has previously stated in her witness statement, she believes that the rain was bought at the beginning of the season. My observation, this is Ms. Murray's hack ring, Exhibit 16. My observation of the hack ring revealed that this time frame did not correspond. The wear I observed on the hack ring was consistent with a hack ring that is about 2 years old.
Did this lead you to consider anything based on your examination?
Well, based off of this examination, it led me to wonder about the care that was given to Ms. Murray's hack ring. Ms. Henry had stated that it was new, but like I said, it did
Objection,
not
Your Honor.
correspond
Pursuant to what
with
we know in hearsay, this is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter.
May I respond, Your Honor? This is not an out-of-court statement, as the statement was made in court today, as well as being made in Ms. Henry's sworn statement, which Mr. Belmar has testified that he has read his preparation for this case, as well as he listened to Ms. Henry's testimony as he was present in the courtroom.
Your Honor, if I may add, this specific statement was not made in court today. Ms. Henry did not testify that this hack ring was bought new this season, and therefore it is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter.
Your Honor, I stand by my objection. It's contained within the witness statements, which were made under oath, under penalty of perjury, and are stipulated.
I'm going to, it's not your objection, it's his objection. I'm going to overrule the objection at this time. So.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Belmont, can you, where were you saying about the level of care?
Well, I was saying that based off my observation of this, it caused me to wonder about the level of care that Ms. Murray's hack ring received. And as the court knows, it's common knowledge that she was not the only one caring for her equipment. In addition to this, there are a number of different factors that can lead to the reduced strength of a hack ring. Such factors include chemicals. Often riders will wrap adhesive tape around the Honda portion of the hack ring for increased strength. Although this doesn't add much to it, Once the hack rein becomes worn and dirty, riders will have to either cut that tape off or replace it if necessary.
And how does this weaken the rope?
Well, once riders have to cut the tape off, microscopic fibers are made. Microscopic tears are made in the fibers of the hack rein.
Is there anything else that can weaken a hack rein?
Well, equipment care is very important when dealing with a hack. The hack rein is one of the most important pieces of equipment because it is the only thing a rider can hold on to during the ride. It's important to discard old and worn hack reins if you notice that damage. Due to the wear that I observed in Ms. Murray's hack rein, it's very likely that pressure alone could have caused that rein to break.
In your expert opinion, with the wear that you observed, could the rein have broken at any other location than the Honda?
Although the wear I observed in Ms. Murray's hack rein was not extensive enough where it would have broken at this portion above the above the Honda, I do believe that at the Honda portion, which is very vulnerable to damage, it's very likely that it could have broken.
Why is the Honda so vulnerable?
Well, the Honda, because of its location, like I said, pressure is applied to the same location during the ride time and time again, such as the Honda, and that can cause it to break. Also, if a hack rein is subject to rough surfaces and sharp edges, such as ornamental saddles, that can cause it to break as well. Ms. Murray did use an ornamental saddle.
And so we heard Detective Nye speak about examining tape. Why don't you speak about examining any tape found on Ms. Murray's hack rein?
Although I did examine tape residue found over the hack rein used by Ms. Murray, I did not examine any tape because I was not provided with any tape.
Can you confirm or deny Ms. Nye's assessment?
Well, because I
Mr. Nye.
was not able to examine any tape, I cannot confirm Mr. Nye's testimony.
So, Mr. Bowman, which of your theories are you asserting is what happened in the case of Billy Joe Murray's hack rein?
Unfortunately, even with my extensive knowledge of hack reins and my time observing Ms. Murray's hack rein and doing a microscopic analysis, I cannot assert which one of these theories is true, if any of them at all.
And why is that?
Well, like I was saying, in addition to the number of factors that go into the degradation of a hack rein, there are also a number of different scenarios that could have happened, and there's no direct way to say if the rope was cut at all or even who cut the rope.
And based on your forensic analysis, was there any indication as to who cut the rope?
No, there was not. All I can say is that if the rope was cut, it would have had to have been by someone who has an extensive knowledge of bronze riding. That does include Ms. Bourne, but it also includes anybody attending the event, any of the officials at the event, even other competitors such as Macy.
Was there any thing in your forensic analysis that pointed to Dakota Bourne as the culprit in this case?
No, there was no direct forensic evidence that linked Ms. Bourne to this case.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Mr. Bowman, you're being paid for today's testimony, correct?
Yes, I get paid for today's testimony, and I've also gotten paid for my other testimonies. My flat rate is $450 an hour.
And this $450 per hour is being offered to you by the defense, correct?
Yes, I've also testified for the prosecution, though I get paid either way.
Now, you're here today because you examined multiple pieces of evidence pertaining to today's case, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Now, one of the pieces of evidence that you examined was the hack rein of the deceased, correct?
Yes, I did examine Ms. Murray's hack rein.
And you dated this hack rein, correct?
I cannot date with any certainty exactly when Ms. Murray's hack rein was purchased or exactly how old it is, but I know that from my observation of the wear on Ms. Murray's hack rein, it was consistent with a hack rein that is 2 years old.
So that is correct, that you were inconclusive on how exactly old the hack rein was, correct?
Yes, I can just say what I noted, which was it was consistent with a hack rein that is 2 years old, although I cannot say exactly if it is 2 years old.
And you examined the split part of the hack rein, correct?
I examined the entire hack ring.
And when examining the split part of the hack ring specifically, you were unable to determine how it was split, correct?
No, it was not, because when I did a microscopic examination of that portion of the hack ring, like I said, it revealed that it could be either cut or frayed.
So that is a yes, that you were unable to determine exactly how the hack ring was cut, correct?
I don't know if the hack ring was even cut at all. Like I was saying, the microscopic examination of the rope revealed that it could be classified as a cut ring or frayed. Because of this, it's really too close of a call to say what happened.
So you do not know how the hack ring broke, correct?
As I've said, no, I do not know what happened to the hack ring and how it broke.
Now, you also examined the sisal fibers that you found in Miss Bourne's neck, correct?
Yes, that's true.
But you were unable to determine exactly where these sisal fibers came from, correct?
Like I stated before, sisal fibers are a very, very common material. They're used in the agricultural industry and hay baling and even the rodeo industry.
So that is a yes, that you were unable to determine exactly where these specific sisal fibers came from.
Because of that, no, I was not able to say exactly where these sisal fibers came from.
Therefore, there was not one, not two, but 3 specific examinations in which you were inconclusive in your results, correct?
Yes, and that's exactly why I'm here today, to share that with you all.
Now, let's talk about the hack ring again, shall we? You're aware that riders can choose what type of hack ring to use, correct?
Yes, riders often use different kinds of hack rings.
And you're aware that Miss Murray chose a sisal fiber hack ring, correct?
Yes, Miss Murray uses a sisal fiber.
And you are also aware that this specific type of hack ring is known for its strength and durability, isn't that right?
Yes, although sisal fiber or sisal hack rings are known for their strength and durability, equipment care, like I said, is very important.
So that is a yes, that you are aware that this specific type of hack ring is known for its strength and durability, correct?
Yes, they're known for their strength and durability.
Furthermore, when examining the split part of the Honda, you stated yourself that you found evidence that led you to believe that the hack ring could have been cut, correct?
Yes, there's evidence for the hack ring having could have been cut or also not cut at all or completely cut.
So that is a yes, that the hack ring of the deceased could have been cut.
Potentially, yes.
Now, let's talk about the sisal fibers again. You found these sisal fibers in the blade of Miss Bourne's knife, correct?
I actually did not find them in the blade of Miss Bourne's knife.
I'm sorry, you found them in the sheath of the knife, correct?
I suppose. I just examined the blade and there were 2 sisal fibers along with it. Mr. Nye was actually the one who examined.
But you are aware that the sisal fibers were connected to the knife, correct?
I believe so.
And you, as mentioned before, are aware that the deceased used a sisal fiber hack ring, correct?
Yes, Miss Murray used a sisal fiber ring.
Now, you compared the sisal fibers that went along with the knife to the sisal fibers in the hack ring, correct?
Like I said, the fibers that were found in the knife were consistent with that of Miss Murray's ring, but they're also consistent with any other sisal fiber. There's no fingerprints on the fibers to say exactly where they came from.
So, Mr. Bellman, that is exactly right. That the sisal fibers found in the knife of Miss Bourne were visually identical of the sisal fibers in Miss Murray's hack ring.
I'm sorry, I have to disagree with you. I do not believe they're identical. They're consistent. They're about the same, but they're identical in a sense, I guess, to any sisal fiber.
So that is a yes, that the sisal fibers in the knife are consistent with the sisal fibers in the hack ring, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Mr. Belmont, were your inconclusive results a result of your investigation?
No, I do not believe they're a result of my investigation. Given the evidence today and my thorough analysis of the evidence, I don't believe myself or anybody else in the industry would be able to come up with a conclusive result.
And in your expert opinion, are all 3 of your theories possible?
Yes, all three of them are possible, but like I said, some are a little more likely than others. But
Thank you, no further questions.
Permission to recross round? Mr. Bowman, it is possible that the hack ring was cut, correct?
potentially the hack ring could have been cut, yes, or not cut at all.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Sit down, sir.
Thank you. The defense calls Dakota Bourne the defendant to stand. Ms. Bourne, before we begin questioning, you're well aware that you're waiving your Fifth Amendment right testifying here today.
Yes, I am voluntarily here today to clear my name and tell my truth.
Dakota, how long have you been, or could you introduce yourself to the court?
Of course, my name is Dakota Warren, but most people know me as Cody, and I am 20 years old.
Dakota, how long have you been bronc riding?
I've been bronc riding for as long as I can remember. My dad has taught me everything I know. He's taught me since I was a little girl, and he's really my true inspiration for bronc riding.
Did your father, you mentioned your father passed. Did he leave you anything after his passing?
Yes, after he passed, he left me, the only thing that I received was a red pocket knife. It means everything to me. It has a 1.5-inch blade, which is only about half of my pinky. It has a pair of scissors and a file. Like I said, this knife means everything to me. I carry it everywhere. It's my lucky charm, my rabbit's foot, and I never let it leave my sight.
Dakota, did you have aspirations for higher education?
Yes, I've actually been accepted into the University of Delaware, only on a small scholarship. I have really good grades, I just don't have the money to afford tuition right now.
And did your father's passing affect your ability to afford this college?
Yes, my mother used all of her savings to try to help find treatment for my father, but that wasn't enough, and right now we're searching for money to pay for my college.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Did the rodeo offer any financial aid?
Yes, I was working towards a scholarship offered through the rodeo that was based on my performance, but also my character.
And, due to your attendance in court today, are you able to receive said scholarship?
No matter the outcome of today, I am no longer in the running or able to receive this scholarship.
Moving on to the night before the day in question, it's been previously mentioned there was a hoedown. Did you attend said hoedown?
Yes, I was at the hoedown that night. I was there all evening. I left when things started getting really loud and my head started hurting, and I had to go check on my equipment.
And do you know about what time you left?
No, like I said, I was there all evening. I couldn't really tell you the time.
And so after you left, you mentioned you headed to the tack room. What did you do in said tack room?
Yes. Before my way to the tack room, I actually felt something very special. I felt the presence of my father, and I had heard him tell me that I had all the confidence that I needed to win the next day.
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 403, more prejudicial than probative, this statement only goes to prejudice the view of the jury of this witness and holds no probative value in my case today.
Your Honor, I would argue that the hearing of her father's voice is in fact very probative in today's case, and that it is directly cited in the prosecution's opening, a line from the postcard in question, and this line of questioning better clarifies and describes said line as the prosecution used.
Your Honor, if I may, the foundation has not been laid that there is any correlation between this, but also the mere fact that this witness had some interaction with her dad holds no probative value and does not go towards any motive or opportunity in the case at hand today, and therefore is more prejudicial than probative.
Overrule the objection at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I can continue. Like I said, I had felt the presence of him. He had given me all the confidence I needed, and he really ensured me that I was the best that I could be. And then I headed to my own stall to check on my things.
And while you were in the tack room in the arena, did you see anyone anywhere?
No, I did not see anyone, and even if they saw me, I wouldn't mind because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was in my own stall with my own gear, checking up on it, Checking on my gear was really a routine thing. It was like making my bed or brushing my teeth. I did it all the time because I feel like I'm a very safe and secure bronc rider.
And so after you checked on your gear, where did you go?
After I checked on my gear, I went back to my hotel room and wrote a postcard to my brother Tater about the things I had heard earlier that evening.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4? The right to reflective shown in opposing counsel.
No objections, Your Honor.
Dakota, is this a true and accurate copy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I ask that Exhibit 4 be admitted into evidence.
No objections, Your
Without
Honor.
objection, be entered into evidence.
Dakota, I'm just going to ask you about a couple lines and some clarification for us in the court today.
Of course.
You mentioned basically in the middle of the article, quote, all I needed was a little edge. Could you explain that for us?
The little edge I was referencing was just the confidence that my father had reinstilled in me earlier that evening. Having something like that from someone who's passed away was very special, and I just knew that it could help me the next day in the competition.
You continue to say, quote, I've taken care of everything, end quote. What did you mean by that?
I was taking care of my own gear, my own things in my own stall.
And finally, you finish with, there's no way I can lose. Could you clarify that for us?
Yes, I was just being confident. My brother understands me and knows that confidence isn't a crime, and I would never do anything unlawful.
Moving on to the day of the event in question. After arriving on the fairgrounds, where did you head?
After arriving to the competition arena, I headed to my own stall in the tap room to check on my things once more. On the way to my own stall, I do have to pass a couple of other stalls, one being Billy Joe's. Her bag was in my way. I moved it out of the way. I never went through it, never touched anything inside of her bag, just placed it to the side.
And for clarification, you were never in Mrs. Murray's tack room, correct?
No, I was just trying to get to my own stall.
So throughout your testimony, you've mentioned many a time now your explicit care for your gear. Would you consider this an average level for people at your skill group?
No, I actually think I'm more responsible for my gear, especially more than Billy Joe. I never saw her check on her own things unless it was Macy Henry doing the deed.
Objection, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 701 speculation, this witness cannot testify as to whether or not she would have more, or she would be taking care of her gear more than she would, or than more than Billy Joe or Macy Henry would, as she is neither of these two people and cannot speculate to their mindset.
Your Honor, not only was the defendant present in court today and heard the full backing behind the taking care of her gear, she also has extensive knowledge of the person in question in this exact instance. And as someone who's been bronc riding for, as she testified, most of her life, I feel like she is fully capable of testifying to the care of her gear in comparison to somebody who's been in part of her life for a majority of it.
Your Honor, if I may, this witness still would have to speculate to be able to say whether or not she took care of her gear more than another competitor did.
I'm going to sustain the rejection only so far as this witness can testify to what she has seen.
And Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 611, need permission for this witness's testimony to be stricken from the record.
We'll strike that minor portion, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Would you like me to continue, ask the question again? Sorry.
Sure.
Would you consider this an average level of, would you consider this an average level of care for people at your school?
No, like I said, I feel I'm much more careful with my gear.
So you were present during the ride of, were you there the day of the ride?
Yes, I was.
And you watched Billy Joe Murray fall off her horse?
Yes, Billy Joe's falling off of her horse was a terrible occurrence. At the time, we thought she just fallen off of her horse. It's very common in bronc riding for people to fall off of their horse. We never thought that something as terrible as death could occur. We thought she would just walk away with a bump or a bruise.
Did you hear of her passing?
Yes, I did.
And would you consider that an unusual event in your own opinion?
Yes, I've never seen death occur from someone falling off of their horse.
Finally, did you kill Billy Joe?
No, I didn't. I know such a thing would make my father very disappointed in me, and I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I also wouldn't be able to live with myself because that's not something a good person would do, and I think I'm a good and kind person.
Did you cut the rein?
No. What happened to Billy Joe was a terrible accident. I would never do something of the sort.
Are you guilty of the accused charges?
No.
No further questions.
I started bronc riding when I was a little girl, and my father's taught me everything I know.
And you're familiar with saddle bronc riding, yes?
Yes, I would say I know a little bit about it since I've been doing it since I was a little girl.
And you're familiar with all the equipment or tack needed in saddle bronc riding, yes?
Yes, I would say so. I take care of my own things. I do my own thing.
And you would agree with me that it's extremely important for riders to keep their equipment in good condition, yes?
Yes, I normally keep my gear in my own stall just to make sure it's protected and safe and that no one goes through it or tries to do anything bad to it.
And the hack rein is one of the more important pieces of equipment, correct?
Yes, the hack rein is what you hold on to stay on to a bronc or a horse, you may say.
And you would also agree with me that if anything were to happen to a rider's hack rein, it would be incredibly dangerous, wouldn't it?
Usually if something would happen to your hack rein, you would fall off of the horse, and that is dangerous, but normally you just walk away if you fall off your horse from a simple injury, bump, or bruise.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Billie Joe Murray. You've known Billie Joe Murray for 10 years, yes?
Yes, we've known each other for a pretty long time.
And in the past, you've described her in the following ways. Mean. You've described her as mean, correct?
Yes, she can get a little mean at times, but I mean, she was very good at what she did, and she was very proud of that, so sometimes meanness came out, yes.
You've described her as arrogant.
Yes, she was arrogant at times, I can't deny that. Like I said, she was very famous in the bronc riding world, so sometimes it got to her.
You've described her as vindictive.
Yes, I did.
And she could even make you mad, couldn't she?
Yes, she did make me mad, but only on times when she did mean things, such as talk about my father badly. That's really the only time she made me mad, and he had passed away at the time, so I think she knew that she was being a mean person.
In fact, Miss Boren, she made you mad the night of the hoedown when everybody was cheering her on, correct?
The only thing that really made me mad the night of the hoedown was that it was so loud and I was getting a headache and I just wanted to leave. And I also knew that I had a competition the next day, so I was focused on that.
But Miss Boren, isn't it true, and I quote, that everybody cheering on Billie Joe just made you want to hurl?
Yes, like I said, cheering is very loud. It was getting to me. I was getting claustrophobic and hot, and I just needed to leave. It wasn't necessarily her that made me mad. It was the noise and the party, and I just wanted to leave and go check on my own things and go to bed.
Now, you left the hoedown early, correct?
Yes, I was there basically all night. I couldn't tell you what time I left.
And after you left the hoedown, you went to the tack room, correct?
I went to my stall to check on my own things.
Now, there aren't any locks in the tack room, are there?
No, there aren't any locks. We kind of have an honor system. You don't touch other people's things. The only reason I ever touched Billie Joe's bag was because it was in my way.
But, Miss Boren, in this tack area, you would have had the opportunity to cut Billie Joe Murray's hack ring, wouldn't you?
Objection, speculation. The question in full was fully speculative of Dakota Boren's whereabouts and decisions on the night in question, and therefore I ask that it just be.
This witness just testified to knowing that there were no locks in the tack area, and I'm simply exploring, based on her rationally based perception, as to if she would have had access to the gear that was in the tack area and Billie Joe Murray's gear, and if she would have had an opportunity to access that.
Your Honor, I would say that the question was not only argumentative, but also more prejudicial than probative, as this is a hypothetical and adds no real value to today's case.
Because he added,
Yeah. Your Honor, this question is extremely probative in the fact that the case at hand today is looking at the opportunity that Dakota Boren would have had to cut the hack rein, and therefore this question is going to the opportunity that she would have had.
I would say it is still argumentative, and it still is a hypothetical question and has no real bearing in today's actions.
I'm going to sustain the objection, but if you could rephrase, perhaps you can get to where you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Boren, as you just testified, there aren't any locks in the tack room, correct?
No, they're not. Everyone has access to all the stalls, but like I said, we're all pretty trustable people, and we go by the honor system.
And because any of the gear in the tack area, correct?
I may have had access, but I only really cared about my own stall. I only cared about my own performance. I was kind of a shy person, so I don't really like to talk to other people. I kind of mind my own business and do my own thing.
Now, after you left the hoedown that same night, you wrote a postcard to your younger brother, Tatum, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this postcard. On this postcard, on the fourth line down, it's written, "All I needed was a little edge," correct?
Yes, that is what I wrote about my father.
And then you go on to say, "I have taken care of everything, and now I just have to trust it will all work out the way I have planned." Did I read that correctly?
Yes, I wrote that about my gear and how I had taken care of it that night.
These are your words, correct?
Yes, I did write this to my brother.
I'd like to talk to you about the next morning. You are aware on the morning of the Harrington Finals that Billy Joe Murray fell off her horse and had to be carried out of the arena, correct?
Yes, at the time we thought Billy Joe did not have a serious accident. We thought that she just was minorly hurt. We never thought such anything could happen that did happen.
And this fall had no negative impact on your ride, did it?
No, at the time we didn't think anything very severely had happened to Billy Joe. So, like I said, I just went on with my own performance. I was worried about myself. I wasn't worried about others, and yes.
And you even scored an 82 that day, didn't you?
Yes, I scored pretty well that day.
You would agree with me that's a pretty high score, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, you had many motivations to win the Harrington Finals, correct?
My father, the scholarship.
Yes. One of those motivations was the scholarship, yes?
Yes, I needed it to help pay for college.
And this scholarship is for $30,000 a year, correct?
Yes, it would help me pay for college.
And that would be a total of $120,000, wouldn't it?
Yes, it's a very nice scholarship. I was working towards it because bronc riding was my passion and my hobby, and I knew that it was very achievable for me. It wasn't out of the realm of reason.
And you've been accepted to the University of Delaware, correct?
Yes, I have, on a small scholarship.
And you aren't able to afford college without the rodeo scholarship, are you?
Right now, I can't go to college without the rodeo scholarship, but now that I'm not able to receive the scholarship at all because I'm here today, I have to look for other opportunities. I'm sure it's not impossible for me to go to school.
But Ms. Bourne, that's a yes. Without the rodeo scholarship, you don't know how you'll be able to attend college.
No, but I'm sure I could find a way. There's loans and other things.
Thank you, Ms. Bourne. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
May you redirect?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. You can step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Defense press.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Again, just to keep things moving, we will take a brief recess in place, give you about 5 minutes to discuss what you're going to do for closing, and we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes. Okay? I apologize for cutting that a little shorter. I was informed that we should move things along a little quicker. All of us have faults, and so is council ready to proceed with closing argument?
We are, Your Honor.
Okay. That's open.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to request to reserve any remaining time for rebuttal.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. Billy Joe Murray was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. But because the defendant was desperate, because she took desperate measures, Billy Joe Murray didn't get to have that life. Now, the defendant wanted to win $120,000 from the National Co-Ed Rodeo Association. And in order to do that, she needed to beat Billy Joe at the final rodeo of the season, the Harrington Finals. There were 2 problems. First off, Billy Joe usually scored better than the defendant. And on top of that, at this rodeo, she had drawn a much better horse. But the defendant was desperate for that money, and desperate times call for desperate measures. So she took desperate measures. She left the hoedown early, snuck to the arena when she thought no one would be there, and cut Billy Joe's Honda, the most important part of her hack ring. Now, we as the prosecution have the burden of proof in today's case. We must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of murder in the second degree. There are two parts of this charge that are in dispute today. The first part of this charge is that the defendant recklessly caused the death of Billy Joe Murray. Now, when the defendant cut her Honda, she directly caused her fall, she directly caused her death. And as a bronc rider herself, she knew the risks. She knows the importance of equipment. And the second part of this charge, that what she did manifested cruel, wicked, and depraved indifference to human life. Now that sounds like a high charge, but all it really means is that she knew what she was doing. She did it willfully and voluntarily, and she was aware of the risks. And we've proven these two things to you beyond a reasonable doubt, which means that ours is the only reasonable explanation for the facts of today's case. Now to do this, we showed you three witnesses. First, we showed you Macy Henry, who, despite what the defense contends, we saw has no motive to commit this crime. She was competing for fun, and Billy Joe was her best friend. All she ever did was support her. Now, she also saw the defendant meddling with Billy Joe's gear. Second, we heard from Sean McGee, another eyewitness who saw the defendant meddling with Billy Joe's gear, and who also saw the defendant outside the tack room with a knife the night before the Harrington Finals. Finally, we heard from Detective Sam Nye, the lead detective in today's case, who detailed his thorough investigation, who told us why he arrested the defendant and why she has motive, opportunity, and an abundance of forensic evidence against her. Now, the defense also presented three witnesses. We heard from Ripley Cook, the vice president of the NCRA, who told us that the defendant had ample access to Billy Joe's gear because there are no security measures, and who told us that Billy Joe would have had to have been disqualified in order for the defendant to win. And then we heard from the defense's own expert, Sidney Bellman, who, despite being hired and paid by the defense, has no conclusive evidence today. None of his tests were conclusive, and who told us himself that he didn't examine all of the evidence. He couldn't examine the tape or tell us if it indicated that the rope was cut. And finally, we heard from the defendant herself. Now, the defendant sat up there on the stand and told us, when asked, that her first concern was not for Billy Joe's safety or other riders' safety, but rather to not disappoint her father. And then on cross-examination, she told us that she only worried about herself, not about others. Now we know that the defendant was in the arena the night before the hoedown, the night of the hoedown. She admitted to it. She always has her knife on her. She never liked Billy Joe, and she was desperate for that scholarship money. And desperate times call for desperate measures. So we must ask you to hold the defendant accountable and find her guilty of murder in the second degree. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Today, you have heard of a hard-working, dedicated young girl named Dakota Bourne. She was passionately competing in a sport that she loved, both to pursue her lifelong dream of achieving a higher education and to honor her father. But now she's being called a murderer. The prosecution has presented to you that Dakota Bourne is desperate. And Dakota Bourne is desperate. Desperate to reveal her truth and clear her name. Your Honor, members of the jury, as this case comes to a close, you will be asked to decide if Dakota Bourne is guilty of second-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt. This was the prosecution's burden of proof. This is what they had to convince you of. But with the evidence you have heard from the witnesses who have testified today, you can see the abundance of doubt surrounding this case. Sam Nye conducted a flawed investigation driven by an immediate suspicion of Dakota Bourne based on stories he heard about the competitive nature of Dakota Bourne and Billy Joe Murray's relationship. Based on this prejudice against Miss Bourne, Detective Nye went looking for what he wanted to see, for what was easier for him to see. His initial assessment was that Billy Joe Murray's hack ring had been intentionally cut, without ever considering the ring could have simply broken. Detective Nye also failed to fully investigate the other prime suspect in this case, Macy Henry. Detective Nye ignored Macy Henry's motive to make a move against Billy Joe and her complete and total access to Billy Joe Murray's equipment, including her hack ring. Detective Nye also neglected to search Macy Henry's hotel room to evaluate the potential evidence. Meanwhile, Detective Nye built a basis of evidence to incriminate Dakota Boren that is shaky at best. Detective Nye arrested Dakota Boren without a scrap of forensic evidence connecting her to the crime. He arrested Dakota Boren relying only upon the pseudo-eyewitness accounts of Macy Henry and Sean McGee, who, besides basing their stories on guesswork, never see Dakota Boren handling, let alone cutting, Billy Joe Murray's hack. In fact, no one did. Sam Nye saw a murder where more objective minds, like the defense's forensics expert Sidney Belmont, saw a more nuanced situation. Mr. Belmont has extensive expertise in rodeo equipment and hack rings specifically, and yet after carefully examining the evidence, even Mr. Belmont could not say definitively how Billy Joe Murray's hack ring had broken, let alone who could have been responsible. The number of unanswered questions in this case is staggering. The prosecution has failed to prove the 3 elements of second-degree murder, which are as follows. First, that Billy Joe Murray died, which unfortunately cannot be contested. Second, that her death was recklessly caused by the defendant. As we have just reviewed, there is far too much doubt surrounding this case to say that Dakota Boren is responsible for this death. And if you agree with me on this point, I can sit down right now. However, even if you do believe that Dakota Boren did in fact cut Billy Joe Murray's hack ring beyond a reasonable doubt, the prosecution has still failed to prove that this action was reckless, as per the second element of second-degree murder, or that this action manifested a cruel, wicked, and depraved indifference to human life, as per the third element. Dakota Boren did not need Billy Joe Murray to die to win the competition, the belt buckle, and the scholarship. All she needed was for Billy Joe Murray to fall off her horse before the 8-second mark, which would disqualify her. And if her only intent was to disqualify Ms. Murray and never to endanger her life, then Ms. Boren's alleged actions are not consistent with second-degree murder. Furthermore, you heard from several witnesses today, all with lifelong experience with rodeos, that Billy Joe Murray's death was extremely irregular. Ripley Kerr told you that in her 10 years of producing rodeos, she has never had a death or even serious injury occur at one of her events. You heard Sean McGee, Macy Henry, and Dakota Boren shock that Billy Joe Murray's fall had caused her to die. Because falling off horses is a part of saddle bronc riding. It's normal. It happens all the time. It's rare for a rider to even break a bone when they fall. Most walk away with nothing more than a few bumps and bruises. Therefore, even if you believe that Billy Joe Murray's hack ring was intentionally cut, there was no indication that this action would kill or even seriously injure Ms. Murray, and therefore Dakota Boren's alleged actions cannot have been reckless or indifferent to human life. Your Honor, members of the jury, it would be easier to have someone to blame this death on rather than accept it as a tragic accident, and it would be easier to blame a rival than a friend. But it is also easy to see that neither of these explanations is substantiated by the evidence. I therefore ask you, the jury, to do what is easy, to do what is right, and to find Dakota Boren not guilty of murder in the second degree. Thank you.
Yes. It's open.
Rebuttal,
You reserve the time.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I too will ask you to do what is right, but I'm not going to try to convince you that it's easy. The defendant did what was easy. Rather than competing fairly, she sabotaged her opponent. But I ask you to do what is right, even though it is hard. I ask you to see that she was desperate, to see that all of the evidence points to Dakota Boren being the one to sever Billy Joe's hack ring, and to find her guilty of murder in the second degree. Thank you.
Are there any other matters from the board?
We have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. In the championship round, we do not come back from deliberation. We're going to go ahead to across the hotel. We're going to go deliberate, but first, before we do that, I just want you to know who's judging you. So if our members of the team will start.
Oh, sure. Good afternoon. My name is Jane Brady. I served as your Attorney General for 3 terms and then as a judge of the Superior Court, and I'm actually the president of the Board of Trustees of the Law Related Education Center that is the prime sponsor of this event. Thank you for participating, and thank you for supporting them.
Hi all, I'm Cleon Cawley, a former prosecutor and defense attorney, and I'm currently the COO for Delaware State University.
Hello everyone, I'm Garrett Moritz. I'm a civil litigator at Ross Aaron Stamp.
Hello, my name is Chris Sachi. I'm the Chief Judge of the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the District of Delaware, where we don't have juries, thank goodness. And you all did a wonderful job.
Hi, I'm Alex Mackler. I'm the Chief Deputy Attorney General at the Department of Justice, the AG's office. I'm a current and former prosecutor, and 20-plus years ago, I was sitting where you guys were sitting. You did a great job.
And I'm Alan Davis. I'm the Chief Magistrate. I've been the Chief Judge of the Justice of the Peace Court in Delaware for 15 years, and we rarely have attorneys in our court. Coming more often, but still not as frequent as I'd like, and any of you are welcome to represent people in my court.